My painting style has evolved quite a bit over these past few years. This is what my watercolor paintings looked like a few years ago, and this is what they look like now. One of the goals that I have pursued ever since I started out as an artist is to become a looser watercolor painter. What do I mean by this? So this painting style for me, it means maintaining a certain element of realism, but without having it go all the way to photorealism. It means not obsessing too much over every little detail, not being so tight and controlled, allowing some of that spontaneity and playfulness and fluidity that this medium is so good at, and not being a slave to my references, allowing myself some creative liberty as I paint. I haven't fully arrived to where I want to be just yet, but I have come a long way. So in this video, I thought I would share my top tips for how to paint in a looser style with watercolor, and give you some ideas if that is one of your goals as well in your painting practice. So let's get started. A loose watercolor painting starts at the sketching stage, if you even want to do a sketch. Ideally, for the loosest possible look, we would paint entirely freehand, no pencil sketch. This, however, takes a certain level of skill and fearlessness that takes a lot of time and practice to build. I'm not there yet, so what I do instead is a kind of hybrid approach. One of the trademarks of this style is a contrast between sharpness and softness, between what's in focus and looking quite realistic, and what's out of focus and a bit more obscure or abstract. It is a natural instinct when you're painting, especially if you're using a photo reference, to get carried away and want to include everything you see in your reference. And then all of a sudden, all parts of your painting are equally detailed and nothing is left to the imagination. We get away from this by choosing a very narrow focus for our painting. So in this painting, my focus will be not just the bee, but only certain parts of the bee. The parts where I see the most contrast in the reference image, which is the darkest parts of the legs to the left, and then this right side of the lower body with this highlight over here and these really dark stripes. So my plan in my head is to spell these parts out the most and be as loose as possible with everything else, especially the background, and I will get to that later on in this video. Trick number 2. Since I still need some kind of sketch to work from, so that I can make sure that the final painting will be accurate enough, I will draw a sketch, but I will keep my sketch as minimal as possible. Because the more details I put in my sketch, the more tempted I will be to include all of those details in the final painting, exactly the way that I've drawn them. And that, in my experience, can feel kind of limiting. It limits spontaneity and looseness. So usually the only things I focus on in my sketch is to get the placement and the basic shapes right, get the proportions right, and create just a simple scaffolding for my painting. But I will leave as much of the detail work as possible for the painting stage. And this goes hand in hand with the next trick, which is to save a few things to do completely freehand as I'm painting. You can usually tell in a watercolor painting when something has been drawn in first as a sketch and when it's been painted freehand. Freehand watercolor painting just has a looser, more spontaneous look to it. So in this bee, I'm leaving the wings and the shape of this flower to be painted entirely freehand. And I'm also going to freestyle the exact shape of the upper body and the head and all of the other obscured in the reference anyways. I'm not a slave to my reference. I'm not trying to copy the photo exactly, because that to me just feels boring. Another trick I do to achieve this style is to be very abstract with my backgrounds. Because again, clear distinction between what's in focus and out of focus. The main character in this painting is the bee, and so I want to limit any other distracting features, such as lots of details in the background. There's a lot going on in the background in this reference. There's a lot of things that I could include, but I'm going to ignore all of it. I'm even going to ignore the exact colors. Instead, I am selecting the colors I think are going to nicely complement the colors of this bee. So I think about complementary colors here. This bee has a lot of warm, orangey, earthy tones in it, and the complementary color to orange is blue, but I still want the background to read as green and be interpreted as kind of a garden environment. So I'm choosing a muted, cool green, green with a little bit of blue mixed into it. And then I practice fearlessness by just wetting the paper and dropping in some color and swishing it around. Not overthinking it, not being tight and controlled and second guessing every brushstroke, deliberately messing up my brushstrokes. And the number one trick of all, know when to stop and step away from the painting. This is really, really difficult with watercolor because we get carried away. We are in flow, we're having fun, and we want to include just one more detail, correct just this one brushstroke, and then we overwork our painting to death. We lose the spontaneity, we create blotchy washes and cauliflowers and ugly stains. The best way to prevent that is to take frequent breaks, step away from the painting, maybe let it dry up, and then ask yourself, might the painting actually be finished already? Would adding more to it actually help? Or would it just create more distracting details and risk losing the playfulness and the looseness of it? I find that most of the time the painting is finished a lot sooner than I think. The most common way that I mess up an otherwise good painting is by not stepping away from it early enough. And getting into the habit of stopping sooner has been a game changer for becoming a looser watercolor painter. All of these clips that I've showed you are actually from my latest watercolor workshop or class. It's called Watercolor Insect Illustration, and in it I walk you through step by step painting 3 different watercolor insect in this particular style. So realistic, but also a little bit painterly and abstract and loose. So all the way from drawing up a sketch to selecting your colors, mixing your colors, building up your painting in layers, making that kind of abstract looking background, and putting the final touches on your painting. It's almost 2 hours long. It's the longest class I've released this far. It's in real time. Nothing is sped up or cut out. It's just you and me having a nice, chill painting session together where I walk you through my entire thought process and all of the decisions I make, why I make them, all of the tools I use and how I use them, etc. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, I invite you to check the class out. There's a link down below in the description. Those are my best tricks for painting in a looser, more painterly style. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you got some new ideas that you can try out the next time you sit down to paint. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video.